Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Erin. I'm here to help you find your path to your best emotional and physical health. This is a continuation of our series on cognitive decline and prevention of that. So hang in there with me, and if you like what you hear, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the thumbs up and send this out to anybody else that you think might need it and wants to work on their overall cognition and prevention of brain decline. So with that, let's get into today's quick subject. So we're going to talk just a little bit about how we got here from our traditional eating habits and why are we in such a problem with our cognitive decline, our chronic disease states, and all of that, and how is that all related to our diet. So if you just for a little bit of history, if you think about what's kind of gone on over thousands of years, consider that we have as a species the largest brains, okay? Largest brains compared to our body size of any other animal, okay? And that is significant because it means there's a lot to kind of monitor and keep track of and to keep healthy, right? So our brains are enormous, okay? And they actually started to decline about 10,000 years ago. Imagine that. They were larger before that. And there is some ideas that our brains actually started to prune about 10,000 years ago when agriculture became the norm and our biodiversity and our food diversity kind of became less. And so that's one of the theories that the anthropologists are thinking that this has kind of declined a little bit due to agriculture and less biodiversity. Now, of course, our bodies are going to try to adapt to that, but it can be somewhat difficult. So based upon our original thought processes, and we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit more, about kind of the genetics behind it, we actually kind of had this, we've talked off and on about the APOE4 allele, which is the one that's more likely to give you Alzheimer's. And that's actually the original allele. And it was more common in those early humanoids and those kind of species and the early humans over, something like 22,000 years ago or something like that. Or no, even before that. And so because we survived on this biodiverse hunter-gatherer, we gather our food, maybe a little bit of meat, but it was very, very plant-based with some meat added in as they had that available to them. So, and then about 220,000 years ago, the actual APOE3 allele came out, the one that's a little bit more safe. And then even later, about 20,000 years ago, they've become the APOE2 allele, which is even rarer, came out. So those kinds of genetic changes, based upon what the anthropologists have researched, have taken thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years. And they think it may have something to do with the introduction of fire and more meat-based as opposed to just gathering plants and stuff like that. So what does that mean for our overall cognitive health? Well, it tells you a little bit about how our bodies have changed and adapted. But also, we need to consider that our bodies have not changed and adapted as fast as our agriculture industry, okay? So even though 10,000 years ago we had agriculture, it's really only been in the last 100 years that our food production has really boomed. Okay, and so in about 1974, the food pyramid as we know it today was introduced in Sweden. And then it came out in, what year was 1992 in the U.S., something like that. So this is kind of what we base our foods on today, right? And our eating style, that we put all the grains and those kinds of things are what you're supposed to mostly eat. And what do those typically turn into? Processed foods, right? So, and then the next one is going to be the vegetables and then the meats and the fruits and stuff like that. Well, that was 20 some years ago, actually more than that. If the food pyramid started in 1974, you're talking almost 50 years ago. So we need to consider that we have not bothered to update our information and how we eat to bring into our current scientific knowledge, okay? Because it's really, really important that we understand that our agriculture and our industry and our production of food has far outpaced our ability to adapt. There just hasn't been enough generations. So they actually are starting to consider changing that food pyramid to something a little bit different because, of course, as we've talked before, fasting is really, really important, and we kind of need to do more of that in the timing of the food. But then the really bottom of the pyramid needs to be those leafy, green, non-starchy vegetables, because that's where we get all of our fiber, and that's where we get, all of our nutrients and our micronutrients and minerals and those kinds of things. And then on top of that, we can add stuff like prebiotics and probiotics, fermented foods, those kinds of things that have somewhat come later as well. And then animal proteins and fruits. And then, of course, on the top, the indulgences like our breads, our pastas, our candies, our wine, all kinds of things like that. So that's kind of some of the new proposals that are going along. And, we kind of, as an industry and as a culture, not only in the United States, but worldwide, have kind of maintained that this kind of processed food is okay. And a lot of it was political in nature, and a lot of it was for financial gain. For example, the Heart Association used to advertise all these low-fat foods as being heart healthy, and they tend to be very high in sugars and very high in corn syrup, causing all kinds of other additional issues, and in truth, hurting the heart, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Of course, it remains for debate whether they knew that before all of this advertising came out, or if that's something that came later. But at any rate, this is what we know now. So now we have to kind of fix what we've been thinking and re-educate people so that they can be healthier, and to kind of correct this kind of ongoing problem that we have kind of created within our culture. So to go back to the food pyramid, the new food pyramid a little bit, we're going to kind of get into more detail about that as we go along and kind of get into what's really, really important, because it's going to take a number of videos to probably talk about that kind of stuff, because it is a lot of detail. But we need to kind of understand the really basis of it is going to be plants, and plants are so important because fiber is, something that breaks down in the gut, and it actually ferments and gives that makes that beta hydroxybutyrate, which we have talked about off and on, that is one of the alternative sources of fuel for our brain when you don't have enough sugar. And our brain can run on either one. And to create that metabolic flexibility, we want to have enough of that to go around to help our bodies function, so that we're not totally dependent on sugar, creating that ongoing sugar addiction and need for more and more sugar. So as we get more into the nutrition of it all, we'll talk more about those kinds of things. But we want to kind of work on those high fiber, low starchy, low sugar vegetables, so that we can and with a little bit of protein, to kind of create that ketosis that we're kind of looking for. And I'm not talking about huge amounts of ketosis, but just enough to kind of keep the brain functioning the way it's designed to function, because we have not kept up with our food production, and we've just outpaced it. And there's no way that our bodies can process the foods that we have designed for profit. So that's all I have for today. A little bit of a political thing, a little bit of a financial thing, just a little bit of underlying background. So stick with me here, and we'll talk more about the actual things that you can do in the future, and the foods that are important to eat to really kind of improve your brain health. So don't be afraid to download my 5 free videos, and also don't be afraid to subscribe, because there's going to be more great information coming out. Thanks, and have a great day.